Western Mass News is your local election authority, and just a day after we headed to the polls on Super Tuesday, we're now hearing from voters as we look ahead to the general election.
Western Mass News reporter Wesley Days has more on what they had to say about yesterday's presidential primary results and the potential of a rematch between President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. And Wesley, the people you spoke with are less than enthused.
Less than enthused is correct, Abby. Their options in this race for the White House are dwindling fast. Just hours ago, Nikki Haley bowed out of the Republican primary race, leaving those two men as the presumptive nominees for their respective parties.
To be honest with you, I just voted with the lesser of two evils.
Super Tuesday, more like Somber Tuesday.
Kind of sad. I wish we had more younger people, like new ideas instead of the same ideas.
Western Mass voters we spoke to weren't too pleased at the polls. Others had no clue to even show up.
I didn't even know about it, so I didn't think there was big enough of a push, honestly. If I had known, I would have participated.
Ethan wasn't the only no-show.
I hate to use the word abysmal, but it was pretty sad.
Springfield saw a low turnout. Election Commissioner Gladys Oyola Lopez explains.
We had about a little over 10% voter turnout, which is low for a presidential primary, especially one where it's going to be hotly contested.
One Springfield voter tells Western Mass News all of his neighbors need to come out in November.
I'd rather get up and take action than sit around and complain about what's happening. The vote matters.
As you can tell, the feelings around yesterday's election vote weren't electric across the Bay State. The Associated Press reports we saw just over 1 million voters cast their ballots on the Democratic and Republican sides. Reporting live in studio, Wesley Days, Western Mass News.